Welcome back to the channel and not in my shop. I am currently down here at the Midwest Railway Preservation Society, and I've got a project for a 1930s Pullman passenger car that's currently under some extensive restoration down here at the Roundhouse. I am a member and a volunteer machinist down here at Midwest, and like to lend a hand where I can in keeping these old rail cars running and in use. There's a lot of work being performed on this rail car, but what we're working on today is actually on the exterior. What I have to make are a pair of what are referred to as buffer plate pins. I don't fully understand how these are being used, so instead of me explaining it to you, I'm going to let one of our trustees, Pete, who is also our head machinist, explain it.
So on this style in this car, there's two pins that secure all the plates together.
Okay. And we're replacing them just because they need to be replaced, they're due to be replaced, or
One was so bent that it had to be torched out. It was literally bent like that.
from hard coupling. So better the pin to bend than to break the vestibule or something else.
Exactly. And the others have serious wear in them. So while we're at it, we might as well replace them all.
Okay. All right, should be a fun project. Pete had handed me the sketch that he had drawn up when he manufactured one of these on one of the CNC lathes at his shop. But unfortunately, that lathe is busy running other jobs. So I ended up redoing the drawing in Fusion 360 because I'm going to use the manual lathe to make two more. Well, I have this piece of material that Pete gave me to use for the pins, and it is just barely long enough for me to get two pins out of if I don't screw anything up. I'll take this over to the lathe, get it chucked up, and we'll get to work. Well, since I'm trying to get both of these pins out of this one piece of stock, I really don't want to cut it in half and then machine part of the pin and have to flip it around and machine the second part and hope that everything lines up, which means bringing out the forejaw and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to try to machine these by keeping the material as one piece. That gives me part of it to grip onto in the chuck, and then the other part of it is what gets machined. And then I'll flip it over and do this all again, and I'll cut it in half later. I've got the steady rest here on the other end, and I'm going to get the rollers adjusted so that the piece of stock is running concentric with the spindle. I'm only using the steady rest here so I can face off each end and then drill centers so I can then have some tail support. Once I have that, then I won't need the steady rest anymore. With the steady rest all dialed in, we're getting some good concentric rotation here. I'll face off the end and then drill it for tail center. You can see here how rough cut the end of this piece is, which means I'm going to lose even more length, which is again why I'm going through this exercise, because I'm afraid that I'm going to run out of material if I cut it too short. Well, I made a mistake here and I forgot to drill the center for the tail support. I remember it later, but for now I'm going to flip this around so I can face off the other end, and I'll actually drill this in for the tail support. Well, now I need to find where this first one is going to end. I've got a rough idea where the center of the stock is now that it's been faced off, but I need to try to get a little more accurate. The length of these things is not super critical. I just want to make sure I have enough to make two of the exact thing. The overall length of each pin is just shy of 6 3/4 of an inch. I'm just using a ruler to locate that for me, and I'll put a little witness mark here so I know how far I can machine to. I think I'm going to have probably 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch of leeway here, so should be looking pretty good. The maximum OD of any part of the pin is 1 7/16 of an inch, or 1 437.5 thousandths. So I'm going to turn this down until I reach that maximum OD. The one thing I really don't like about machining this 4130, I think that's what this is the stringiness of the chips. Because I can't take really deep depth of cuts with this lathe, I have to take shallower cuts, and because of those shallower cuts, I'm not getting a good chip break. So I've tried multiple insert geometries and nothing really seems to work on this lathe. So I have to live with having these really long, stringy chips, which can be dangerous, and I really despise them. I've had good luck getting decent surface finish with this particular insert, and even though it's breaking a chip, even though it's longer, the surface finish is just abhorrent. I have this whole thing machined down or turned down to the maximum OD. Now I need to machine the smaller of the two diameters. And it stops a little less than 6.5 inches from the end. Because between the smaller OD and the larger OD, there's a 45-degree taper. I'll put another witness mark here and turn this section down to 1 inch and an eighth, 1.125 inches.
Oh, mother.
And there is how a moment of carelessness will cause you to ruin a part. I'm not sure what in the heck I was thinking, but somehow I managed to turn the cross slide handle in. I don't know why, and it dug in and ruined this part. I was within a couple of passes of this finished OD, and that groove is deep. It's really deep. Will this pin be okay if I left it? Yeah, it probably would be, but I can't leave it. This is going to end up scrapping this half. So I'm going to have to come up with another piece of material because I'm only going to be able to get one pin out of this now. Unfortunate indeed. So I guess what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this piece of material out of the chuck. I'm going to cut off this part that I screwed up, and I'm just going to flip it over and just make the other pin. I'll have to find another piece of material. I'll bring you back when I get a little bit further along in making that new pin, about where we are here. I managed to not screw this one up yet, but I want to try to improve the surface finish a little bit before I finish the machining on this. So just using a little emery to try to clean the OD up a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. The last feature I need to machine on the pin is a 45-degree taper or countersink that's up at the head. To machine the taper, I have a 60 thousandths radius grooving tool in the tool holder. The print calls for a 60 thousandths radius at the bottom of the taper, and I have the compound set at 45 degrees. I'll keep taking light cuts here until the taper and the radius of the groove tool lines up tangentially to the pin. I want to check the length here at the base of the taper. This should be a little less than 6.5 inches long. So I will continue to machine the taper until I get to that length. want to touch off on the pin here a little bit and see if I can't blend that radius and that taper in so we get a really nice clean finish. I'll clean it up the rest of the way with some emery. Last thing to do here is to part it off. I've got the lathe moving nice and slow. I actually set my power feed to be a nice fine feed, and I feed in with the cross slide. I've had really good luck just running it slow, lots of lubrication, and just using the power feed so the feed is consistent. And it might take a little bit of time, but trying to run a parting tool on this lathe at too high of a speed, it just doesn't work. I don't think this lathe is rigid enough for that. It's just a little bit too worn out. Well, I have it flipped over in the chuck, and I'll get rid of that little pip in the middle. We'll face off the end, clean it up, and chamfer it. Well, I managed to find another piece of material that I could use to make a second pin. I did that off camera, and now we can complete the machining operations over here at the Bridgeport. I need to drill a cross hole in the end of the part for a cotter pin or cotter key. I'm using my edge finder here to find the end of the pin as well as its center. The drawing specified a cross hole that's 13/32. So we'll start with my normal spotting drill and a little bit of anchor loop. I'm using a single flute chamfering bit here to put a nice chamfer on this hole. I want to chamfer the opposite end of this cross hole. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reinstall the drill and loosen the vice clamps. I'll rotate it, and then I'll just bring the drill down through the hole. That locates it for me under the spindle. I'll reclamp it, and then I can drill the chamfer knowing that it's going to be lined up where it's supposed to be. I think that finishes up really nicely. So I need to do the same thing to the second pin. Well, that's both of these pins now complete. I think they came out great. Now I just need to wait until some of the other work that's being done on that passenger car is complete. And once they drop it back down onto its trucks, we should be able to go ahead and disassemble those existing pins and part of the vestibule and get these new ones installed. Well, now that the rail car is back on its trucks, it'll make it a little bit easier to install these pins. Step one will be to remove the old pins. Now, one of these was already replaced, but the other three I need to get out of the pocket, and to do that there is a pretty big cotter pin going through the hole in the end of it. I'm going to try to use some pliers and whatever other tools I can find that's close by.
Yeah, maybe
and I think it's going to be a little bit too much to try to straighten this thing out. So we might end up having to cut it out. Yeah, I think instead of trying to figure out how to get these things out by bending them, it's just going to be easier to take a zip wheel and cut them off. Well, I suspect these have been replaced before because this little access hole, I'm going to call it, in the top of this floor plate shouldn't really be there. But this one right here doesn't look too bad. Some of the other ones were in much rougher shape. Well, we can drop the new one into its home and then replace the cotter pin with a new one.
Once we get this in, yeah. I don't know what shooting.
We pretty much ran into the same issues on the pins on the other end of the passenger car. The cotter pins were so big that we didn't even bother to try to straighten them out. We just went straight to the zip wheel. Well, this pin here was a little bit more of a struggle to get out. The access hole, if you want to call it that, really wasn't providing much access. The hole itself was actually too small to remove the head of the pin. So maybe this is an original one that was never replaced. So what I'm doing now is using a die grinder here to try and enlarge this top access hole to make room for the head of the pin. Well, the springs on the vestibule on this side of the passenger car were a little stiffer than the ones on the front. And there was actually quite a bit of spring pressure on this pin. I had to knock it out from underneath. And you can see how that vestibule springs out a little bit when the pin comes loose. Well, because of that spring pressure too, this pin is not going to go in as nicely. Well, luckily I was able to enlist some help from my friends Roland and Nick, and we figured out a way to apply a little leverage on those vestibule springs for that pin to drop into place.
Ah, perfect.
Good job, Ron. We're good. We're done.
Okay. Nice.
Feet on the other side.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Well, it was a fun, simple project. I enjoyed working on this rail car here, considering it's nearly 100 years old. There's still a lot of work that has to be done to it, but I don't think that any of it's going to require any work out of the machine shop. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed working on the project. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Give me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you're a subscriber, I thank you. If you're not, consider hitting that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you use the bell icon, you'll know when a new video gets dropped. And a special thank you to those of you who've chosen to support the channel either through Patreon or PayPal. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.